everything. We believe everything is hashgacha pratis. Everything is divine providence. Nothing in the world is haphazard or coincidental. The issue that we're talking about today has extreme relevance to our present day situation. What do I mean? The topic that we're discussing really about flogging and about this what we call premature death, karlis, right? These are punishments that the Torah gave for violation of certain prohibitions. Now, the Gemara, the Talmud is going to discuss an argument between various schools of thought, and the basis of their argument really comes down to is, can a person have a double punishment for one crime? If you do one crime, can you be punished twice for the same crime, even if it's two different punishments? Meaning that, let's take for example, eating chametz on Pesach. All right, just theoretically, someone eats leaven on Passover, where the punishment is clearly stated in the Bible that if someone goes ahead and commits this transgression, that means after being warned that you may not eat leaven on Passover, now the punishment has to also be connected to the warning. It can't just be you're not allowed to eat. It must be explicitly stated what the punishment is. So if the punishment is going to be flogging, that means you tell the person, no, that if you eat this bagel or whatever is going to be on Passover, you're going to get flogged, then the punishment is flogging. Or there's a second type of punishment, meaning premature death. As I mentioned to you, every time it says in the Torah, v'nichrasa, that a person is going to get cut off, God says, I will cut him off from the people. I will cut him off. I will exorcise them from the Jewish people. What kind of punishment is being cut off? That means premature death. So if a person is destined to live 80 years or 90 years, they'll die at 70, 60, 50, 40, again. And I just want to, again, reiterate this, because I'm going to say this once, I'll say this 100 times in the Talmud. Do not look at today's world and ask a question, why? Because I just said if a person eats a bagel, it's going to have premature death. Someone's going to raise their hand and say, I know a 95-year-old guy that lives in somewhere, Katella Manor, that has been eating bagels on Pesach for 73 years. Why? There's no questions why here. I mean, we're just talking here legal theory here. And then later on, when Mashiach comes, teiku. Like we'll find that in the Talmud, a lot of the questions that will go back and forth, the answer will be teiku. Remember that word teiku, which is an acronym for Tishbi, Yetaritz, Kushes, V'iboyis. Tishbi is, if everybody ever went to any kind of Havdalah service, you know it. We have a very famous song, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi. What is Eliyahu? What does that Tishbi mean? What Tishbi? He's a Tishbi. He comes from Tishbi. That's the town that he came from. So Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi, meaning Hatishbi, Teiku is Tishbi, Eliyahu, it's referring to the prophet Eliyahu. He will answer all of the discrepancies in the Talmud. Teiku, Tishbi, Yetaritz, Kushis, V'iboyis, which are really, it's really Aramaic, but it's not. But he will. So when the Talmud gets into this final quandary where you don't know the answer, so it'll be teiku, okay? Teiku. But here, what? Kushis.
Like where is the kushis from the Tishbi?
No. Teiku. Teiku. Teiku is the word.
What's the kushis?
Kushis are questions. Kasha. Tatich will be the fragin, the fear kashas. That I want to ask you the 4 questions, right? So kashas are the 4 questions. Okay, but tonight, the question on the table is going to be, can a person be punished twice for the same crime? And therefore, if there's a crime that you commit that the punishment is so awesome, for example, if it's capital punishment, so can a person also, besides the capital punishment, get flogged? Now, it's certainly not the question if a person gets flogging and capital punishment. That, of course, that's not even really the question, because nobody will argue that you get punished twice for the same crime. We're not going to give you prison and then we're going to kill you. No. If we kill you, then you're exempt from going to prison. If we kill you, you're exempt from getting flogging. If we kill you, you're exempt of, not only are you exempt from the flogging, but you see, for example, here in America, you can, judges can sentence a person to prison, at the same time place a fine upon them, right? I mean, you go to prison for 5 years and you get a fine of $250,000. In Judaism, there's kol lei, there's a ruling, kol lei miderabba minei. Whatever the harsher punishment is, that's what you're going to get. There's no two punishments. So if a person, theoretically, strikes a match and burns down someone's cornfield on the Sabbath, so what happens? The guy's cornfield is burned and he's not going to get any compensation for it. Why? Because the punishment for lighting a match on Shabbos is capital punishment. So they're going to kill him, and the poor guy whose cornfield was burnt down, he's out of luck. Okay, he's out of luck. Because kom lei miderabba minei. Kom lei, we extend to him miderabba, whatever is harder minei from the other. So whatever the harsher punishment is, so it's going to be flogging and a monetary knas. What's harsher? The flogging, obviously. So you flog him, and that's the way it goes. So there are times where this comes into play, where you're only going to give the guy one kind of punishment, and that's it. So the question is going to be here, because I'm telling you already what the established rule is. Here we're still arguing about it. Now, why do I say that it's very relevant today? Because I'm going to go a little bit ahead without going into the Gemara itself. Because really the crux of the argument is going to be, and we discussed this last time, that there's a difference between a heavenly tribunal and a human tribunal. Okay? So if a heavenly tribunal, if a person comes and after eating the chametz on Pesach, after eating, let's say, a bagel on Passover, he confesses and he asks for forgiveness, and he repents. So the heavenly tribunal can forgive him. He's whitewashed. No more. The sin is gone. A human tribunal, meaning human judges, forget about it. Even if the person comes before the judges and he starts crying and he starts pounding his chest and beating his chest, the Gemara is going to argue, one school of thought is going to argue, that they could not forgive him. I mean, there's no way that they could forgive him. So if you murdered, and this is where I'm going to come to now, where we're going to tie it into the present day situation today. So if someone murdered and he comes before the court and he says, you know what, I'm telling you, this was a crime of passion. You don't know what this guy did. He led me to. I'm sorry. It's not me. I'm not this guy. Forget about it. There's no way the judges could really know in the heart of hearts if the man really means it, or if the man is only talking. I mean, theoretically, he wants to get off his punishment. So therefore, of course, he's gonna act. And if he acts, you know what? We're gonna let him off. We'll say, you know what? You're forgiven. You walk. And therefore, we don't know. We're never really gonna know if he was really truly sorry or not. We have two cases right now in the United States. That just today we were talking about it. One, of course, is this famous case here in California. This guy Tookie Williams, the leader of the Crips, and he's up for execution on December the 13th. Now, a lot of activists have come and they've argued in his favor that this guy has sat in prison for a long time, and he's written books and he's repented, and therefore he should be commuted. And now it's up to the governor. I mean, they're going to go the last shot is up to the governor. That only the governor now could commute him because the Supreme Court didn't want to hear his case again. Okay? So what we're thinking about now, the governor's going to listen to this. According to the Talmud, what do we say? We say we never know. In the case of a human who comes in front of a human court and repents, one school of thought is going to say that we cannot accept his argument. We can't. The punishment is the punishment. Hashem told us that, and it's not in our purview to know if in your heart of hearts you really mean it, if you've really repented. Judge, give me one more second. Okay? Then the other case is in Florida of a rapist murderer who raped an 11-year-old girl, and now his judges his attorneys are arguing now that this guy is not the same guy. He was hounded by drugs, and he was a possessed man, and therefore today he's a different kind of a guy, and therefore his death sentence should be commuted as well. Now, if we go strictly, I'll open it up for discussion in a minute. If we go strictly according to the words of the Talmud of this school of thought, where only a heavenly tribunal can really know in your heart of hearts whether you were honest in your forgiveness, and they could wipe the sin clean, or maybe a panel of human judges can also listen to the case, and if they feel strong enough that you are honest in your repentance, they could wipe up. Now remember that in the Talmud there was no prison. There was no such thing as prison. There's no prison. There was no option. So therefore, you know what? If you commuted the sentence, the guy walked. I mean, there were other things that they can do. I mean, if a guy was a murderer, for example, and there was no witnesses or there was no warning, but they knew that he was a murderer, there's other ways that they could punish him, quote unquote, not the official way. Okay, so here again, once again, it's told to us that in the Talmud itself, even though it was written, you know, this is we're talking about 2,000 years ago, you know, close to 2,000 years ago, it has immense relevance to if we were an Israeli court. I mean, of course, we're not talking about American court, but if we was an Israeli court based upon the principles of the Talmud, we'd have to weigh it back and forth because these cases come up, you know, every so often. Okay, Judge, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I don't know where to start.
Okay.
First of all, there's no court of appeal. So there's no 25 years that somebody sits
Right.
So that you can see whether there's been an actual change in the person or not, okay?
Right.
In this particular case, what Tukey Williams has done in those 21 years,
Yeah.
okay, you can measure it, you can see it, you can talk to people, you can see. The guy in Florida is still trying to excuse, okay, so you see the thought process of the person. If the person is saying to you, I was taking drugs, I did it, it wasn't my fault, okay, it wasn't my fault because A, B, and C, and D, then what you're looking at in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whether this person is worth saving now. They're never the same person at the end that they are in the beginning. Never. Some scum buckets were scum buckets and they're scum buckets the day they go. They can't wait to go and they will fight the whole time. But our sense of justice, two things. The first thing is we get 25 years given our system, which no one's happy about. We get 25 years to see what happens to somebody when they're sitting in prison and what happens to them in prison. So Tukey Williams is not only not the same person he was, and I'm not taking a position on capital punishment at all. I'm just saying, for the purposes of your argument,
you're right.
okay?
Right.
That you couldn't tell, only God could tell what was in somebody's heart because the punishment was said, carried out, that was that. So saying I'm sorry doesn't help. It doesn't matter that you're sorry after the fact, if it's 2 days after the fact. If it's 25 years after the fact, then you have to, in justice, in any justice, in this justice, you have to look at the person who's talking to you on
But
that
this
day.
person was in jail. It's easier for him now not to commit other crimes.
No.
He sat in jail, he wrote books, he talked to people, he helped people.
Do you know the amount of crime there is in jail? One of the most honest people I ever had in front of me, I said, oh, it's easy for you to be sober in jail. She said to me, are you kidding me? I can get better drugs in jail than I could ever get on the outside.
No, but you could see her side of the argument.
I can say what
you could
she
see side of the
says,
argument.
But in jail
Right.
is the toughest place to be if you are a black man with all the gangs around you. It is harder to be a good person in jail. It is easier to be an animal in jail for 21 years.
But that's
yeah, you can't kill, they won't kill you. They kill each other.
They will kill each other.
Yeah.
Okay, but he didn't do it.
He wouldn't have been around for 25 years, though.
21.
No, in the Talmud. You're saying in the
21.
Talmud. That's what she said.
They would
There-
have said
that's
that
what I
judgment,
said.
boom, he'd have been
That's
dead
what
the
I
next
said.
day.
What'd she say?
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There wasn't a question of is there rehabilitation was not in their mind. Okay, they did not say, gee, you're entitled for somebody to check and see if there was a mistake here.
Yeah.
Now, but the other part that bothers me even more than this,
Yeah.
because I'm not so sure you shouldn't just say, for God's sakes, you did it and it's over. You're not worthy of. But the other
what
part
do
of
you
that bothers me.
What did that mean?
What do you mean by that?
I mean that I'm not sure certain people should get 25 years for
As
us
opposed
to
to-
mull whether or
Okay,
not.
that's the appeal process.
Okay,
The appeal process. Okay.
needs to be
Right.
cleaned up one way or
Right.
the other.
Fine.
But the fact is, it is what it is, and Tukey Williams is not saying the same thing as the guy in Florida. Okay.
Okay.
The other part that bothers me even more than that is not the retribution, because, this was a violent society back then. This is violent stuff. What bothers me is that the person who is sinned against, never gets whole. I mean, OJ whatever.
He killed.
Okay, whatever he did, he did or didn't do.
Okay.
There are two different courts. It's not like one court saying you get a fine on a jail sentence. Two different courts with two different ways of deciding something. Robert Blake just had exactly the same thing, okay? You burn somebody's house down, that's arson. You may not be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of arson, but a civil court may say, not only did you do it, but that person deserves to be made whole. Where is that here?
Okay, so let me flip the argument back to you. Forget about OJ, but here we see that a civil court did find him guilty, and yet there's no way that these people are ever going to see a penny. The same courts that say, what, OJ, you are guilty and you owe the Brown family $33 million, is the same court say you're never going to see a penny. So there's a contradiction there.
You are begging the question. It's not the question of whether or not they can ever get the money. That's a different matter altogether. The question
we're not saying he's not guilty of burning down.
But this court doesn't even fix the person's field.
So neither does this American court neither fix. He was found guilty in a civil court of law, and these people are owed $33 million for the loss of a loved one, and they're never going to see a penny. And he's sitting with millions of dollars in his account. So it's the same court. It's the same court. Here, and I'm not saying that this guy is not guilty of burning down someone else's house, but in this instance where you have he's deserved of two kinds of punishment. This guy, in this particular case, now it might be an odd case. It probably happens once in a very, 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 very seldom, because it has to exactly come together. Because think about this for a moment. Not the guy was smoking a cigarette. See, if a guy was smoking a cigarette and walking, not by accident, not even by accident. He was smoking a cigarette and he was walking down the street and he flipped the butt into the guy's thing and it burned down. He's going to be liable because the act did not come together. I was very specific in saying that when I struck a match.
You're different.
No. But I'm forgetting about liable and guilty. But I'm talking about a guy strikes a match at this very same time. The act has to literally two acts come together, and therefore this guy who lost his farm. And we believe, now, because he's an American justice, we'll never bring this word in. We believe up in divine justice, and the same divine judge that said, this guy deserves death for Shabbos, is the same divine judge that says, if this case comes about, this guy should not get compensated for his field. Now, you may say, why? You know why? Because I'll tell you why. Because if I took you and I placed you above, possibly, maybe this guy deserves to have his field burnt down. Possibly, we don't know. We don't know. But maybe, possibly, could be that there are other circumstances here that we are not privy to, and therefore we inject divine retribution. Because why should we follow all of these laws? And some of these laws that, if we went through the entire Talmud, are going to be kind of debatable. Let's just say debatable. The ultimate is because they all have the same bottom line. They all have the same basis, and that is God's will. And that's the bottom line to it. Now, this is not a cop-out by saying, I'm not going to give you an answer, Judge. I'm telling you that the same God that said, if I come to you and I punch you in the nose, I'm liable for 5 types of punishments. I owe you for compensation, for health expenses, for the pain, for the embarrassment. The same God that said, I owe you 5 things, is the same God that says that if I light the match and do this, then this guy doesn't deserve compensation. Not that he doesn't deserve compensation, but the other guy is not liable. It's a bashert. That's what it is. You live by divine justice. That's what it is. And they write the commentaries to the Talmud write that why do we have so many cases that never happen? Why? The Talmud goes through scenarios that in a billion years are never going to happen. because we study this, because this is the truth. This is God's wisdom. Now you can never say this in an American court of law, but this is God's wisdom, and therefore, if I walk down the street and my ox kicks your ox, and it only is a regular nice little ox, my ox never damaged, you only get compensated for 50% of your damages. Okay? So if my ox is walking down, think about this, walking down the street, it meets your ox, and it gores your ox, and your ox is damaged to $200, I say to you, here's $100 and have a good day. Why?
Well, maybe it was a used ox.
No, it could have been a used ox. It could have been nothing. That's the way it goes. That's the rules. You only get 50% of your damages. Now we may ask, the rabbis ask, why? Lama. Why is that so? Because the answer is, because this is the way the halacha came down, and you could rationalize it, because an ox generally doesn't gore. And there was no way for the guy really to perform, foreseeable things, all of that stuff. So therefore, we established he only has to pay 50% of the damages. But if he walks into your apple field and he eats the apples, he pays 100% of the damages. So let's think about this for a second. So if an ox gores, it's only 50% of the damages. If he actually eats your apples, he has to pay 100% of the damages.
You still have an ox and you don't have the apples.
What?
You still have the ox
And the other guy,
have the apples.
no. Why? No. The reason is because eating is a common thing of an ox to do. It's not very common for an ox to get nervous and start goring. So therefore, there's no way for you to be able to foresee it, and so therefore we only give you a half of a compensation. But eating, chazer, why didn't you feed your ox? You let your ox.
The ox ate the apples.
Yeah, the ox ate the apples. The ox ate the apples. No, a person is always liable. A person is always liable for 100% of the damages. So if my ox wanders into Bob's vineyard and eats to his heart delight, Bob's got nothing to worry about. But if he gores Bob's ox, he has what to worry about.
But if you burn it down,
only on Shabbos.
Then
at the same time as doing that, and all of this comes down to the bottom line is, because there is divine, and I'll give you the ultimate case in divine retribution, which we're going to insert over here at this time, because we're never going to get anywhere in the text itself. I mean, we're going to be fighting over this till the cows come home, right? So the thing is, till the ox comes home. But let me throw in one more scenario here, okay? A guy is standing on a ladder, okay, and he's washing the windows. Okay, now your mother always told you never walk under a ladder; it's bad luck. This shmo is bad luck. He walks under the ladder, and this guy from the window falls and kills him. Okay, and we all know, everybody comes running. They do an investigation. It was completely an accident. It was an accidental death. Okay, so we say, sorry, you know what, there's an accidental death, this guy shouldn't have it. They checked the ladder, they checked the things, they didn't jostle it, nothing happened, the guy was walking, this guy slipped, it was a pure accident, we're sorry, your loved one is dead, but there's nothing I can do about it. The killer, the murderer, has to run to a city of refuge. Okay, the murderer. That means he can't even be really called a murderer. He's what it is. It's a
homicide.
A homicide.
No, it's not
a homicide.
The killer.
It's an accident.
It's a killer. He actually did kill him. See, the killer. The killer who killed. What manslaughter? Whatever it is, it's the killer. The killer has to. Right. The killer. We're going to call him. The killer has to run to a city of refuge. Now people ask, why should he? And if he doesn't run to the city of refuge, the Torah says, if this guy says, no, I'm not running to the city of refuge, there's no lashes involved in that. You don't have to worry, because there's something in Judaism called the Goyel Hadam, the avenger of blood. So if the deceased family are so enraged by this guy killing their loved one, and he doesn't go to the city of refuge, not in every state there was a city, let's say every capital city was a city of refuge, so I don't want to use but Mr. D killed Mr. C, he's got to run to Sacramento. That's enough of a punishment itself. But you know what? So he has to run to Sacramento and live there for a certain period of time. As long as he's in the borders of Sacramento, the Goyel Adam, the avenger of blood, cannot do anything. If he decides to leave Sacramento, he says, no, this is a crazy city. I don't want to live here. It's crazy. I want to move back to Long Beach. And he hasn't fulfilled the criteria of his punishment. That means he has to stay there until certain things happen, and he didn't do it. He comes back to Long Beach. The avenger of blood may slay him with nothing to worry about. Why? Because this is the punishment. You may ask, okay, let's analyze this for a second. Okay, the guy who was innocently washing the windows. Guy walked under his ladder. He slipped, fell upon him. Guy killed him. This guy who caused an accidental death has to run out to Sacramento. Why?
Leave his business.
Leave his business, his wife, his family, everybody. He has to leave his business. Why? Because God said that there's everything, as that you mentioned the word bashet, everything is predestined. And the fact that this guy killed this guy must mean, in the old, I'm not talking about today, must mean that there's something really more happening than what meets the eye. That there's a reason why these two people came into contact. And there's a reason why this guy died and this guy... Now you may say the guy who died was a saint. We examine his life and we see, the guy never hurt anybody, never drowned any kittens, he never cheated on his wife, he paid his taxes.
Maybe he ate hummus during...
Maybe he ate hummus. There you go. He ate the answer to the whole questions. There he goes. And you examine his life and you see it's absolutely nothing. Still there's no proof. Because this is the way God, ultimately sitting upstairs, who has a much better vantage point of what's going on in the world, sees and brings these two people together. So the guy who was killed, he needed some kind of a... he had to die. He had to die. Now, because he died like this, you know what? We mourn him. We go to his funeral. We bewail him. We eulogize him. He's a great guy. But ultimately, it's hashgacha pratis. This is the way he was supposed to die, and he died. The other guy, somewhere down the line, deserved some kind of punishment. Now we examine the other guy's life and we see this guy was such a good guy. He never cheated on his wife. He never did anything. The fact is that Moses asked God, "My high." I look down at the world and I see to myself, what is going on over here? How could this be? You upstairs, a few weeks ago, Abraham came to God, that was the first lawyer, that we had the first defense lawyer in the history of the world, who came before God and pleaded for the safety of the people of Sodom. Okay? He didn't want the people of Sodom to die. And his argument was, how can you kill innocent with the guilty? So God said, you know what, if you find 50 or 40 righteous, I'll save the city. Couldn't even find 3 guys. Okay? Couldn't find 3 guys. So Moses asked, you judge, you God who sits up in heaven, and you convince everybody that you're a tzedek tirdof, that you pursue justice and you're a just God. Look at down here, look at the world, you see what's going on. Young people get killed, old people suffer, good people are, all of this stuff. How do you justify that? So God said, I hope I could remember the whole medrash, because it's a very interesting medrash. He says, you know what? And he showed him a scene. He says, look at the scene. And the scene is, in the morning, there's a grandfather says goodbye to his grandson who's a shepherd. And the grandson goes and he's walking the sheep. Along the way, he meets, along the way there's a guy traveling with, the kid has some money, and a robber comes and steals him of the money, robs his money, and therefore the kid is distraught. The robber goes and is slain by this knight. Oh no, there's a robber. I'm sorry. This what happened was that the kid went around. He was walking. A robber came to the grandfather's house, robbed him of the money. As he's robbing, a knight came and he killed him, and he took the money, and then the knight stopped his horse. And he bent down to take a drink, and the money fell out of his pocket. And the kid walking down the way found the money. So So God said. So Moses said, "Why did all of this happen?" So he put him up on a higher step, and he showed him, "Oh, look, the money really belonged to the grandfather. The murderer murdered the grandfather. So the knight came along and murdered the robber. The knight, who never really, the money didn't belong to him, lost the money. So the money then came back to the kid. But if you only looked at the first scene, you'd see, why would the kid be a guy?" So the story starts. I remember how the story starts with a guy walking down the way with a bag of money. That's how it is. A guy's walking down the street with a bag of money. $100 in a thing. And Moses is watching this guy, and he's looking this guy whistling along the road, carrying a bag of money. Comes along a knight on a white horse, slays this guy, and steals his money. You say, "Oy vey's mir, look at this guy, the knight killed him." Then the knight is driving with a horse, and he stops the horse, and he bends down to take a drink of water, and the money falls out of his pocket. Along comes a kid, and a shepherd boy, and finds the money. And Moses said, "Rabbi Shalom, God, what are you doing over here? This is justice. An innocent man is killed on the road. The ganef, the knight, who's a killer and a thief, takes the money, loses money. This kid who has no connection to either of them finds the money and walks away." So if we would just look at this scene, we would say, "My God, there's no justice in the world. It's terrible." So then God said to him, "Okay, take one step up." So he takes one step up, and he sees in the morning the grandfather kisses the boy goodbye, and he sends him off on the road. This guy who was walking innocently whistling a tune comes into the grandfather's house, kills him. It's an armed robbery, kills him and steals the money. Then you see the knight coming and killing this guy. Then he's losing money, and the grandson finds it. So now Moses said, okay, because everything now came 360 degrees, because the money really belongs to the kid who's the heir of the grandfather, who was killed by the robber, who was then killed by the knight, who then took the money and lost it to the kid and everybody. That's the way it was.
Freud and O. Henry both read Talmud.
Yeah, there you go. And you see, and therefore, if we look at it with the eyes that this is divine justice, then a lot of questions are at least resolved, because we say, you know what, this is the way God wanted it, and that's the way it is.
Okay, so it's not only for then, it's also for today. And what you said at the beginning about, we see a 95-year-old guy who ate probably chometz for so this is it. It's something that we don't see, and this is an answer to this question.
Right. This is it. The only thing is that this system only works. The system only works when everybody buys into the system. You see, if people don't buy into the system, if today we would come and we would say, we want to institute Talmudic law here in America, that if you eat chametz on Pesach, we're going to flog you, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Because there's punishments in the Torah which are sometimes seem harsh, like, come on, death penalty for striking a match or smoking a cigarette on Shabbos, that seems very harsh. Carrying a handkerchief from here to your car. I mean, that's seems very harsh. Yet on the other hand, the punishment, for example, for rape in the Torah is much more lenient than it is here in America. I'm not so sure if it's more lenient, because you have to marry the woman, who you rape.
Oh.
So I'm not so. No, I'm just. Well, that's the rule. Okay, what? It's a terrible.
Whether she wants to.
No. She doesn't want to. Obviously, he doesn't marry her. But if she wants to, if she says, you've disgraced me, and now I'm not going to be able to get married, so he's stuck kind of with her, that's the punishment. I said it's special, of course.
It's a good thing she was not there last week.
I'm telling you, it would have been what? She would have been animated. It would have animated. So therefore, the punishment for rape in the Torah would be less. It would seem less than punishment here in America for rape, and punishment for Shabbos is more harsh. So therefore, it would never work unless you buy into the system. You buy into the system. Like, for example, gossip, like libel, for example. Right. Libel was much easier to prove in Talmudic times than it is today. If I said, that judge is crazy, and so I went around and everybody heard, the judge is crazy, then you could sue me, and it would not be hard to prove that you were liable against. Even not only to prove that it hurt you, that if I said something against you, Moitzi Shemra, I said something that would, that would shame you, for example.
In my job.
In your job, then, or even not in your job, but just said something that, you're an immoral person. Moitzi Shemra, I would have to pay compensation, which in some ways was easier than what you have to prove liable here today. So the system, again, only works when a vast majority of people buy into the system. If people don't buy into the system, if people don't have faith, don't believe in this whole business, then the system doesn't work. And we see what happens at the end of the Talmudic period, not even then, even earlier. At the end of the temple period, when murder started to become rampant and all of this, they couldn't kill murderers because it was so rampant, you couldn't get them into court fast enough, and people didn't buy into this whole idea, and that was it. And the same thing is true, for example, about people, for example, we have a case in the Torah that we talk about, for example, the sota. Okay, take the sota law just for a moment. What is the sota law? If a man warns his wife, I know you've been carousing with another man, and I'm warning you, don't peruse with this other guy. And then they see the woman hire a room here at the hotel, and she goes in with her paramour, and there's witnesses to it. Then he's two witnesses, or even one witness, really, if they go into, that's because he didn't see anything. He didn't see them commit any crime, because if he did see them commit a crime, then of course she's a married woman, committed adultery. That's a completely different punishment. But he doesn't know if she actually committed adultery or not. So he could take her up to the temple, and they make her drink this potion of this water or whatever, the bitter water, and therefore we wait and see what happens. If she lives, hey, congratulations!
You didn't do it.
You didn't do it. If she lives, if she dies, she did it. Okay, and then this guy also dies. All right, the guy also dies. So the paramour shouldn't think that he's scot-free, because he would also drop dead. So here again, so how do we rationalize this? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Go up to the Temple Mount, make her drink bitter waters, and then wait. See, if her belly explodes, we always know that she was a loose woman. If her belly doesn't explode, then we say, she's a righteous woman, and and this and that, he has to forgive her, etc., etc. Because we buy into the system. We believe this. If you don't believe this, if you say, this is hokey pokey, the rabbis made something up, then it's not going to work. The whole sota issue is not going to work. But if you do believe in the system, and you believe that God is a caring God, and is not only a caring God, but he's involved in the world, that's a very key point, that he's not only an absentee landlord living somewhere up there in heavens and doesn't care what goes on in the world, but God is involved in the world. Then you have over here people that are debating back and forth, always referring back to the Bible, because what I'm telling you tonight is written in the Bible, and that's the constitution of the Jewish people, and you go it from there.
But Christians believe that killing us is what their God tells them to do.
Yeah, okay.
And so they buy into that.
So I agree with that. Yeah, so I buy into that. So what? But that just because someone perverts it. Just because someone perverts what it says in the Bible absolutely doesn't mean that we have to deviate from studying and interpreting the Bible the way we see fit. There's always going to be corrupters of the Bible. There's always going to be corrupters of religion. That you can't help. The moment that you start having people believe, and you have people who have faith in what you say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there's nothing to talk about. But again, never judge a religion by its adherents. Okay? That's it. Never judge a religion by those people that claim to follow it. You look at them. If they're good people and they're honest people, that's a good religion to follow. If they're a bunch of murderers, marauders, and robbers, and highwaymen, and thugs and thieves, then there's nothing to talk about.
So they give a judgment that you got to pay for somebody's cow. Do you actually have to pay for it?
Oh yeah, you have to pay.
What?
Not only you have to pay, now you have to pay. I mean, you look at Maimonides and the laws of torts, which we will be studying hopefully next time we'll be studying a part of the torts. You pay now, not tomorrow. Not even if he says, you know what, I got 30 days, my CD is due. No, you pay right now. As we leave court, you have to pay up.
Cash, not credit.
Cash and not credit. And not only that, if you can't pay up, they go into your property, they sell your field today. They say they send a special appraiser, go to let's just pick JP, we're gonna go to your field, we say JP's field is worth $100, we auction it off, thank you very much, $50 goes to the judge for her cow, and 50 comes to you, have a good day. Not only that, but then of course, you come into the question of, you know what? Okay, I don't have any cash, but I got 3 fields. One of them, I got 3 houses. One is in Beverly Hills, one is in Compton, and one's in Long Beach. You know which one we're taking? The Beverly Hills house. That's the one that goes only in damages. In damages, they take what they call the meitav sadeu, the best of his property. See, in other issues, if let's say you owe creditors money and they come and they sue you, you're not going to have to pay them from the best. If you want to get rid of, you want to pay them off, you could pay them off with your Compton house. But in damages, if you damage me, you're paying from the meitav sadeu, the best of your fields. That's the way torts works. I'm telling you. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. I'm telling you. You see, in text, We haven't gone even 2 words, but we've already gone through 15 pages of Talmud. Trust me, we went through 3 tractates already here. We went through the tractate of flogging, the tractate of torch, we talked about the sota, so maybe we get into this. Okay, so here's where the argument is.
Okay.
No,
So let's-
no, what?
The sota was very interesting.
No, in the Sota, the bitter water was done more to get the woman to confess.
Yeah, obviously.
You mean to scare her?
Yeah.
But part of
Because
She would die out of fear.
No, she would confess.
She would
So
confess.
she wouldn't take the water.
She would say,
So
"Did
she
you
didn't have
do
to take
it?"
the water.
Did you do it? No, okay, you take this, and if you die.
I did it, I
you
did it,
take-
I did it.
I did
Yeah.
it.
So if she did it, if she says she did it, she doesn't have to drink the water, then what happens?
Nothing. She has to divorce her husband.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing she has to do.
But she won't die.
She won't die. You can't kill her because she won't kill her, but she would lose everything she has. That means he could divorce her, he doesn't have to pay for her ketubah, he doesn't have to pay, he has to make no monetary
But
compensation
she
to her.
doesn't die.
Right, yeah. So the fact that she has to figure like this, again, here's what you say. It all boils down to one word, faith. If she doesn't believe, if she's cynical, and she says, you know what, these guys are whack, this water is going to kill me, let's see it. There's nothing,
I didn't do anything.
there's no
The
hemlock.
water's not gonna bother me.
No. Even if she did, if she did, she comes to the temple, and she's cynical, and she says, you know what, then the water's not going to kill me. Yeah, I didn't do it. And the Cohen says, no, confess. We make them. They make her walk around. They tie her out. They give her all kind of different things to do. So she should confess, because what they are going to do is they're going to take God's name. They're going to write it on a piece of paper. They erase it. That's what she drinks. She drinks the ink. She drinks it. Fine. And she's going to say, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to take my chances. Okay. So if you don't have faith, then it doesn't work. But if she's really afraid, if she's a God-fearing woman, even if she fell through, even if she fell through and she committed a sin, because don't forget, most people, while they're committing a sin, never really think in their minds, now this is a religious sin, this is what I'm talking about here, against Allah. Most people, when they commit a religious sin, are still thinking that they're connected to Judaism. No one ever says, you know what, by eating chametz on Pesach, I'm a bad Jew. Go ask Americans here. Talk to any American Jew and ask him, what's the sin you committed? Yeah, he'll tell you, you know what, I didn't fast on Yom Kippur, but it still makes me, I'm still a good Jew. I still feel all right. I still pay my taxes. I still don't drown any baby kittens. I don't commit adultery. I'm still a good Jew. That's, most people think that by doing a sin, you don't rip your connection away from Judaism. And that's where faith comes in. If she believes that even though she committed a sin, because a sin could be committed by anybody, it doesn't have to be that you have to be a louse or a heretic.
Yes.
No.
Don't walk down the street,
Anybody.
especially with an ox.
Oh, you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Stay away from that.
Stay away from.
Stay away from apples.
Stay away from apples. That's for sure.
Don't you talk to me.
That's for sure. Women should definitely stay away from apples. That's the thing.
That's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing.
Came from.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So therefore, you have to be able to have faith, and even within the faith, you just gotta know that the system, you believe the system works. If you don't believe, then it doesn't make a difference. If the woman is going to commit adultery and say, yeah, come on, I'll drink the water. I don't care, 50 times I'll drink the water. The system falls apart. So it's not going to work, because they're not going to keep making women drink, because eventually the system falls apart. If you have a number of people, a good number of people who don't buy into it, who are not faithful, then.
But if people watch it and she doesn't believe in it and says, pretty much,
and she dies.
heck with you, I'm drinking the water, and 2 seconds later she's lying there dead.
That
help faith?
Oh yeah, that helps faith. That helps faith. But the problem is, we're not studying Sota now, but what happens, we have a contingency plan, because the rabbis are not stupid, because what happens if she drinks it, and we're convinced that she did it, because she walks out of the hotel room with a big smile, smoking a cigarette, all of that stuff, okay? So we're convinced that she did it,
You
right?
know too much about this.
Okay? Yeah, I have experience, let's just say. Okay? So therefore, let's just say, we're convinced that she did it. Okay? And she drags her up there. What?
You've heard about it.
I've heard of it. I'm a saint.
People talk to you.
You're kidding? It's way too expensive in California to do this, because, community property. Judges, what they do to you? They come in front of a judge.
What happens in Crown Heights?
Worse. You have to stay with her, and you have to have her mother move in. That's a punishment. not only do you live with her, but her mother gets to move in with you. Okay? So this is worse than, you want to kill yourself after 3 weeks. Believe me, that's the punishment. So therefore what happens is over here, so when they're convinced that she actually did it, they're actually convinced that she did it. Okay, and then she walks and says, no, I don't know, no, I didn't do it. And then Cohen says, listen, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to feed you this water and you're going to drink it and you're going to die if you did it. And she still says, no, and they're convinced. Okay, so they give her the water. No, she drinks the water, okay, and then the Cohenim are sitting there, okay, let's wait, let's wait till she dies. And she's sitting there, so how's it going? And and everybody's like sitting around the room, and like 24 hours goes by and she's not dying, and the Cohenim are saying, die, will you just die? Because we have this vested interest for you to die. Why don't you just die? Please die. And she's not dying, so they had a contingency plan because they knew that people around are going to say, "Ha, you see, we told you." All the scoffers and the heretics and the cynics are all going to say, "Hey, you see, it doesn't work." So they said, "No. You know why she didn't die? Because she must have some virtue in her life that God saved her. Really, she was supposed to die." She was supposed to die, but because something happened, she did something that she was virtuous. So therefore, you see that this whole system only works. See, otherwise the cynics will always win, because a lot of times, believe me, if we concocted this cocktail of the sota and fed it to every woman here in our congregation, no one's dying. I guarantee you, no one's dying, even if they committed adultery 20 times. All right, no one's going to die because the system doesn't work today. This whole relationship with the Almighty and the way He related to the world, like we talked about in the previous Talmud class, when Moses came to the Red Sea, what did he do? He prayed to God, and God caused a miracle to happen. Today, it doesn't work so easy. I mean, God forbid someone is ill.
We're still here.
No, we're still here. But God is not showing open miracles. He will show a miracle, like, for example, the 6-day war we talk about. It was a miracle. But in reality, if you analyze it, was it really a miracle? I mean, Israelis had the planes, and they had the best fighter pilots, and they had guys that knew how to fight, and they had Seichel, as Bob was mentioning, and Moshe Dayan and Yitzhak Rabin and the rest of the generals built this contingency plan, and 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock Monday morning, they unleashed with a fury their jets. In a matter of 3 hours, they had wiped out all of the air forces of Syria and Egypt. So was this really a miracle, or was this good planning? So therefore, you go back and forth. A person of faith says, oh, this is a miracle, because it's like the miracle of Purim. Take a look at the miracle of Purim. It had the same elements to it. Didn't seem like a great miracle. It was Mordechai at the right place at the right time. Esther gives it up to some Goyish king. She wins the beauty contest. She's in the room with him. Haman gets elevated, but Mordechai saves the king's life. Esther figures though she's gonna mess up Haman, let's say, clean up the language here, mess up Haman. Haman comes to a party, she says he's the wicked guy, and Mordechai, the whole thing is a fantastical story, because Achashverosh can't sleep, he ate some bad Chinese food, they tell him about Mordechai saving his life, how did we honor him, he doesn't know how to honor this guy, goes to the garden, who should walk by but Haman. The king asks Haman, think about this, king asks Haman, what should we do to a guy that the king really loves? He thinks, who's he talking about? Me, because he's an arrogant son of a father and mother. So he says, I put him on a horse. He says, go do it to Mordechai. Now, which king tells his prime minister, his best friend, to go and do this to the worst enemy that he has? So it's a fantastical story that's going on over here. No open miracles. God doesn't appear like in the story of Hanukkah, for example, which we're going to celebrate. They light a candle and it lasts for 8 days. They're all sitting, can't you just go out? I mean, like one schmo got the job of watching the candle. You stay here till the candle burns out. He figures, okay, how long can it be? A couple of hours a day, so you got they're out partying the victory of the Maccabees, and this poor schmo is sitting over here watching the candle 1 day, 2 days. By the 6th day, he has already a long beard, and he's starving because he's got to watch the candle. It burns for 8 days. And so here you have two types of relationships. You have got two stories. and you see the relationship between, you never thought about that, right? The whole miracle of Hanukkah, you never thought about this poor guy who was watching the candles burn. Now what if it went out? Don't you think they had a guy watching it? It's only logical, right? If it went out, you got to let somebody know. I mean, they're out partying. I mean, you know, they just kicked the Greeks right out of Israel. They're eating chametz, latkes, and savglanayot. And this poor guy is standing there like watching for 8 days. Okay, anyways, I never, it's a good visual. But the thing is, yeah, there's a good visual. You know what? So one day we'll write a play, we'll do a little comedy on the, you know, on the story of Hanukkah. There's a lot more to talk about, believe me. But here you see two different stories that you have, two different types of relationships, God with the world. One is an open miracle, one is kind of concealed. The Red Sea was an open miracle, and the story of the 6-day war was a concealed miracle. I mean, it was a great miracle. You know, he put the thoughts into Rabbi's and Diane's head. He made sure that the Egyptian pilots were partying the night before. I mean, there's a lot of different things that had to go on in order for this, you know, to happen.
But it's the same thing with the Red Sea that opens. It's also, you know, there are people who say this was not a miracle.
Oh no, okay. That's apologists, for scientific apologists. I mean, but we're talking about just literally people of faith that believe in the story of the story of the miracle. So it was a miracle, but today you don't have that kind of a relationship anymore with God and the world. Very few times do you see a literally open miracle. Now there are stories where a guy goes into a hospital and he's diagnosed with cancer, and then all of a sudden, you know, he prays and the cancer goes away. You know, okay, you know, you hear stories about individuals, you know, mothers, their babies are trapped under a car. Somehow, somewhere, they're able to lift up the car. In a billion years, they'll never be able to replicate that act. But at that moment, they were able to do it, and I believe those miracles. I'm not a cynic that goes around saying that. But we don't have a global miracle. I mean, I want to see a miracle like, you know, where God comes down and brings pestilence on some nation that deserves it. You know, or something like that, and keeps banging them over and over again. We don't see it. We see a tsunami comes and destroys everything in its path. Right? I mean, it gets to Sri Lanka, and it gets India, and it gets Thailand, and it gets, you know, all of the, you know, it doesn't differentiate. I mean, if it only went after, let's say God was punishing the Thais, you just go after the Thais, and when there's a Thai living in Burma, if a Thai is living in Sri Lanka, and it kills and it drowns the Thai, but saves the Sri Lankans, then you say, I mean, there's something fishy going on over here. You know, then it's a miracle. But again, all of this in the Talmud times had people, I'm only saying this because people had to buy into the system. You had to literally...
Wait. We've gone from man to man.
Right.
Man to woman. Man to God.
Human to human. Human to human and human to God.
Human to God. Okay. And then you've now taken it, God to the... Right. Now you're going up there and coming down.
Right. Because it's now, everything is interconnected. Tsunami. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every one of these acts, everything is interconnected. Everything, actions from man to man, person to person, person to God, and God to person is all interconnected. The Torah does not differentiate between an act, between a person and a person, even though of course there's different punishments, different things, but in the big global scheme of things, it's all one thing is interconnected. Meaning that if a guy, like I mentioned before, if a guy accidentally kills someone else, he has to run to a city of refuge. This is a completely spiritual repentance. It makes absolutely no sense. Because I didn't do anything. Why should I have to run and give up my family, give up my business? I didn't do anything. I was standing on the ladder. Why should I have to go? Why? Because this is the way God commanded it. And if we live in this land and we buy into it. Now, if everybody says this is a stupid law, and let's just disregard it, like if the majority of people would say it's a stupid law, let's disregard it. Why do we have to do it? Then it would fall apart.
Perhaps the guy was careless, though.
Which guy?
The latter.
The guy on top or the guy on the bottom?
On top.
Negligent.
Negligence.
Yes.
Negligence.
He was.
So negligence, so then he would have to pay. Right. It wouldn't be he would have to pay compensation. Means he would have to pay for the if he was negligent. He'd have to pay for the guy's damages, you know, all whatever he suffered, but he wouldn't have to run to the city of refuge. Why would he have to run to the city of refuge for? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
But if he was negligent and the guy still died,
Yeah.
as opposed to an accident and the guy died, he's better off being negligent and the guy dies.
Well, hold on 1 second. If he's
That's
negligent and the guy dies, if he's negligent and the guy dies, so let's say
He falls off because he wasn't
yeah,
paying
so
attention to
it doesn't
his
matter. He still has to go to the city of
He's
refuge.
swinging his
he still
hammer.
has
He still has to go to the city of
Off.
refuge. It doesn't matter. If the guy dies, he has to go to the city of refuge.
Wait,
Doesn't
even
matter.
if
Has to
you
go.
paid, even if you paid?
Even, no. Now, the question is like this. If, that this is a good question. So if the guy, let's say, was chopping wood, okay, and the handle flew off. Now that's negligence, because he should have checked his axe. Okay, he should have checked his axe. Now he flies and he kills the guy. All right, he kills the guy, and he has to now run to the city of refuge. Chances are he would not have to pay damages because he has to run to the city of refuge. Now, if the guy lingered around, you know, and then he didn't die instantly, so now he's responsible for the damages. If the guy dies, he has to go to the city of refuge. So if the guy died instantly, where the act came together, he won't have to pay. So he's better off if the guy dies instantly.
Right away.
Right away, he wants to kill the guy. So if he's going to do it, you want to kill the guy right away. Because if he lingers, then what happens is he doesn't
Just
have to
like
run to
today.
this. What?
Just like today. If you kill him, then you don't have to pay nothing. But if you don't, then you got to pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all different laws of have to do it. But I'm just we're surmising. But again, the question begs to be answered is, why do I have to go? The answer is because this is the way God, and we live in a theocracy. This is not a democracy. Remember this. This is not a democratic where you could come up and say, hey, you know what? This is a theocracy. Kach ola b'tzoynai. Such was his will. And because it's his will, and the punishment for cursing your parents is capital punishment. If you curse your mother or your father, they're going to kill you. That's the way God wants it, and that's the way it's going to be.
But it's not all that black and white, because you have all this discussion in
Right.
Talmud
Exactly.
over
Right.
the different sides of the argument.
Exactly.
You could die of old
Exactly.
age before they decide. if
Before
you're
they
gonna go
decide
right
something.
away.
But the one good thing they did, that's once they decided, they carried out the punishment right away. It wasn't that they lingered around and said, let's think about it right away. You know, you owe the guy the money, pay the money, finished. Now, in capital punishment, they did give you a chance if you had witnesses. If, let's say, okay, you give you a certain amount of time, they didn't kill him, like, okay, guilty, 2 minutes later the guy is beheaded. Well, we're not talking about that. But they gave him a little chance for, if, let's say, witnesses came, they made an announcement, you know, okay, this guy was liable for the capital punishment. Anybody who has anything they want to say about this case, please come forward. So if witnesses came forward and said, hey, you know what, we saw, we were there, somehow they discounted or they contradicted the testimony of the first witnesses, and they were credible. I mean, the judges checked them out. Then, of course, the guy would go free because the first set of witnesses that convicted him were discredited. Fine. That they were allowed to do, except in one case. They would not take any once they said guilty, he was guilty, and no matter who came forward would they accept any testimony. There's one case in the Talmud that they talk about that. But nonetheless, this is, again, I can reiterate this, only it works because it's a theocracy. Because, for example, I'll give you one more example. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different examples, but here's the example of the rebellious son. Now we talked about this past week. It's an interesting study. Okay, Abraham had how many sons? Two. Oldest son was? Okay, what happened last week with Ishmael? Ishmael was a bum, right? The Torah tells us Ishmael was a bum, right? And what did they do? Sarah said, send him away. What happened when they sent him away? What happened? Remember the story? What happened when
hid behind the
what happened?
God saves him.
What happened to him before God saves him? He was
sick.
He was very sick, and he was, what happened? What did Hagar do?
She left him.
She left him, and she went to cry at the tree, right? Okay, at that moment there's a medrash, okay? The moment the medrash says like this, angels came before God, and they said, let him die, please. Let him die. Why? Because what was going to happen, if you looked and they said in the future, the Jews were going to come to the Arabs, and there's a whole story after they were driven out by Nebuchadnezzar. In the first exile, they came to the Arabs and they figured, oh, you know what, the Arabs are their cousins because Ishmael came from Abraham, and they came to seek refuge, and the Arabs butchered them. So the angel said to God, look in the future what's going to happen. Let him die now. Kill him now, God, and we won't have to suffer. The Jews won't have to suffer in the future what they were going to do. So God said, no, you can't do that. Why? Because it says, Basher Hu Sham. Because right now, is he guilty or innocent? At this moment, he was 15 years old at the time. Is he guilty or is he innocent? Innocent. He didn't do anything yet. So how can you kill the guy if he didn't do anything yet? So I save him because of what is going to happen. I'm not taking away free choice. Okay? Innocent. We all agree, right? Okay. Leap forward 20, 40 portions down the line. The end of Deuteronomy. There's a case that goes like this. Two parents have a kid. The kid is a Ben Sire a rebellious son. He's a glutton. He's a drunkard, and he's 13 years old. Okay, he's 13 years old. That's the age that they have to bring him to the courts, and they say, "Listen, this kid is incorrigible. He's literally incorrigible. He steals from us. He drinks. He eats like a chazer. You know, he doesn't pay attention. Doesn't listen to us. You know what's the punishment for the rebellious son? How? You stone him. Okay, could you imagine how two parents have to take their son to court, and they have to drag him in front of the court, and they say in front of the court, this is our incorrigible son, he doesn't listen to us, he doesn't behave, he's a zoilo v'soive, he's a glutton, he's a drunkard. Okay, the court says, okay, you know what, let's take him out to where they used to stone you, because stoning wasn't just throwing a rock on you. Before they threw a rock on you, it wasn't so simple. They took you to this high place, they pushed you down, you rolled down this valley and cut yourself, and then they threw the rocks upon you. Okay, but they did do one thing before. They got you drunk so you wouldn't have to feel the pain. So they said, they gave you this like liquor, whatever they gave you, so you didn't exactly know what state of mind you're in, but they pushed you off and then they stoned you. Okay, so here are two parents who stoned their son. Now, what was his crime? What was it?
Incorrigible.
He was, okay, so incorrigible, you get killed for being incorrigible?
And gluttony.
He disrespected.
He just, for disrespecting, you don't get death for disrespecting your parents.
We
He didn't-
deny him. Yes, it is.
What
That's
about-
No,
fact.
only if you curse him. Only if you curse him. If you
Was
say
he
to
bar
him,
mitzvah yet?
he was bar mitzvah. He was bar
Now
mitzvah.
he's a man. He's
Okay, no, but think about what his crime is. His crime is that he's incorrigible. He's a drunkard. Okay, he drinks, so an alcoholic doesn't get death penalty. He eats a lot. It says he ate like a turmiser shel basar. He ate a big amount of beef. Okay, so what? So he's a chazer, so that doesn't get you death penalty. Only cursing your parents. I mean, say, I wish my great God should kill my. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. He just didn't listen to them. He didn't go to school. He ran away. But you know what the Talmud says? Now think about this. You know why you kill him? Because this is preventive. Because we see the way the guy is walking. We see the way the guy is going to live. And we see that his parents it's impossible to train him and to educate him. So you know what? Kill him now. Kill him now. So later on we'll save ourselves a headache.
Jeez, I
Hold
wish
it.
I could do that.
Well, yeah. So think about this for a second.
God.
Here, on one hand, but there's a contradiction. Because at Ishmael, what did God say? Basher hu sham, the way he is now, right? But in the case of the rebellious son, what? So now in the future, because in the future we're going to save ourselves a heartache, and we have to kill him right now. Okay, so the scholars thought about this. The Talmud scholars thought about this. How this happened? So first of all, the Gemara says, the Talmud says in the tractate of Sanhedrin, that's a tractate that deals with all of the court system, how the court system was set up. So one of it says that this case never happened. The case of a rebellious son never happened. There was never a case of a rebellious son ever brought to any of the courts while Israel for 1,000 years stood. Never happened. Because there was too many coincidences that had to come together. But the point being that my daughter came to me yesterday and she said, you know what, we read an interesting story. We read a story, I don't know where she heard it or whether they were talking about it, that the babysitter of Hitler came into his room, right? He was 2 years old, the parents weren't there, and he was sleeping in his crib, okay? And she somehow had a vision of what this guy would grow up to be. And she had a dilemma in her life. What should she do? She can kill him right there. Or say, well, he's only 2 years old. Look at this guy. You can't take away free will, right? I mean, well, if he's going to grow up to be a monster, but it's not right now. He's not a monster. He's a cute little kid sleeping. Although he was probably never cute. Mamzer. But you know what? With a mustache. He had probably a mustache when he was on there. That's it. With a baby with a mustache. So there you go. So the question would be, what would you do? So I told him, to me there would be no question. I'd suffocate him like there would be no tomorrow. And not only would I would, if this was Hitler and I knew what he was going to do, we would save 50 million people from certain death, right? You would do that. Although we all agreed that for Ishmael, God did the right thing, right? He didn't punish him for what was going to happen 1,000 years down the line that his ancestors were going to do, right? So it's not so. It's
You
not
mean we
so.
would all agree?
No.
What? Did we all agree that Ishmael should have been saved? Does anybody
But
think that Ishmael should have
was
been
it
killed?
because
No, I think he should
Ishmael
have been
did
killed.
anything? You think
No,
Ishmael should have been
he
killed?
should have been killed.
The angels came before God.
Right.
And they foresaw what was going to happen.
Right.
But Ishmael didn't do it.
Yeah, but you can't kill somebody because.
But it's the same with Hitler, 2-year-old.
No, but Hitler did it.
No, because this was the person that's gonna grow
Hitler did
to be the
Exactly.
monster.
But
the
Ishmael
opposite
never
came
grew to be
Ishmael
a
wasn't gonna be the
But
monster.
Ishmael never grew to be a monster.
Each
That's the difference.
future generations.
Himself.
Himself.
Because later on in the portion it tells us that Ishmael repented and he was, he came with Isaac together. So God says, I can't kill him now for what was going to happen. Basher Husham, you got to judge him for where he is right now. But the incorrigible son, we do kill, right? As what we call it, preventive medicine. Right? Instead of why wait till the guy goes out and kills somebody and then we're going to have to drag him back into court to kill. We see the way the guy is going and we kill him there. So sometimes I bring this up because you know what, there are certain times that you have to take preventive medicine and there are some times where you have to say no, I can't take away, I let the guy. You have to judge him for what he is right now. And since he is right now innocent, Ishmael didn't do anything in his life to warrant death at this moment. This guy, even the incorrigible kid, I can say, you know what? He is so incorrigible, and he's stealing, and he's doing all of these things. It's only a small little step. He's already at the borderline of where he's going to cross over. So we do take preventive medicine.
Well, how do you know
Toki
he's not
Williams.
going to repent?
We're back to Toki Williams.
No.
We're back.
But you don't know. That's the see that. So therefore, we go back to the first argument of what I said is what that this is God's judgment, and that's why. And you're right, Bob. In a case of if we were just a very human secular court and God was not part of it, there's no way you could kill him in court. You can't. There's no way that you could take a 13-year-old kid whose only crime is being drunk and eating a lot and not listening to his parents, even if he stole money from them. There's no way you could kill this kid. But if God says to you, hey, I'm telling you, you got to trust me in this one, that take this kid and kill him. Because if you don't, you're going to, down the line, you're going to suffer. So therefore we say we put away our sensibilities, because my sensibility would be, if I was in the court, I'd say, you can't kill this guy. He's 13 years old, and like Bob says, and he's, and a good argument would be that this kid still has a chance for repentance. Although I wouldn't say this about Hitler, because now, so we play Monday morning quarterback. We see already what Hitler did, obviously, right? We wouldn't say the same thing about Beethoven, right? If you had Beethoven and would you kill Beethoven? No, if you kill Beethoven, you take away such beauty and pleasure, right? Okay, so but Hitler, we see in the future. So therefore, in this case, God is telling you, put away your sensibilities. Forget about it. I know you're going to disagree, and you're going to go out of court, and you're going to feel bad about yourself, and you're going to sit in temple, and you're going to say, we did something wrong. You know why we did something wrong? Because we, as the leaders of the community, are also guilty because we have such a kid in front of us. What kind of a society is able to raise such a kid? So we have to repent as well. And believe me, you're going to feel that if you're a judge and you say guilty, and you're going to sentence this kid to death, and you're going to be standing there while they stone him. You should go to shul and you go shamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu. I stole. I was the one, because as a leader in the community, it's part of me, because a society allows this to happen. And what I'm saying, I could justify this because when there's another rule, man, I'm telling you, we're jumping from one to another. There's another rule. If you find just a corpse near a town, a corpse, what happens? So it's a terrible thing. Someone killed this guy. We don't know who did it. So they send out 2 messengers from the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem.
Well, just because you found a corpse, how do you know that someone killed him?
If you see a gunshot, you know that he was killed. You know that he was killed. Well, you figure he was. You didn't find no gun. He was killed. The guy was killed, and you find a corpse and there's no murderer. What you have to do is they send out 2 messengers from the Sanhedrin, and the messengers come and they measure what's the closest city. If the closest city happens to be Long Beach, they call out the leaders of the city, and the Kohanim come out and they bring a heifer. You know, a heifer is this little ox, and they sacrifice it. And they say in front of everybody, like a little baby cow, they sacrifice it right there and then, and they kill it. It's called the Egla Rufa, and the leaders say, God in heaven, please forgive us, because we did everything we could to make this man stay in our city pleasurable. We fed him, we lodged him, we didn't do anything to make this guy stay uncomfortable. Now, why do I have to say that for? Well, why? If this guy was shot outside of town, getting all the leaders of Long Beach Jewish community come out to the town, they all assemble there, the Sanhedrin forces them to read this declaration that please forgive us because innocent blood was spilled. You know why? Because if in your town you are harboring murderers, there's something wrong with the leadership of this town. There's something wrong here in this place. If this is what's going on over here, because if you were good leaders and you were educating your people the right way, you would say to yourself, hey, it couldn't happen from us. But you know what? It did happen from you. And here's a stranger laying on the ground right next to your city, the outskirts of the city, and he's been murdered by probably one of your people in your town. So you, the leaders, have to repent because there's a responsibility. How we ended up talking about this, from about sacrifices and going from this, and that's what the Torah is all about. What? That's Purim. That's Purim.
Two points.
Good. This is what it's all about, fighting.
There's too much inconsistency.
Okay.
Between, the no good son and the situation with Ishmael. Because you could make an argument that all of Ishmael's descendants,
right,
they're Ishmael.
Yeah, but the son is just himself.
Beg your pardon?
The son, the son is not Ishmael.
The rebellious son.
The rebellious son is just himself.
No, but what Bob is saying is that the descendants are him. They're part of him.
They're part of him. Let's do a little bit of preventive societal action here.
Right. No, listen, that's what the angels argued. The angels did say to him, let's do it, but God said no. God voted against taking preventive action on this side, and that's why, it's you're dealing here with a lot of different.
But then there's the cop out. Well, this is God's will.
No, because Ishmael.
It is a cop out.
Well, the thing is, we talked about this. We talked about this yesterday, right? About the apologist. I mean, this is God's will. This is the way it was. This is what God wanted. You know what? When you come to matters of faith, not everything is going to be rational. Not everything is going to fit into a perfect box. That's the way faith works. If we were a perfect rational, it wouldn't be called religion. So if you have to come onto faith and you have to and you have to suspend for a few moments all of your logic, not so much in the Talmud, because in the Talmud we at least try to understand, like, you know what, can you do this, could you do that, why this, why that, so we want to try to get, but ultimately you cannot divorce the Talmud, even as much as we try to analyze it scientifically, from faith, because if you do that, and people have done that, then you leave the parameters of orthodoxy, and you could go. You already start to wander into the territory of conservative Judaism, and then you go even further out there, and then you go into the territory. So an Orthodox Jew will look at the Talmud and will say, you know what, I'm going to try to understand this as best of my ability, and I'm going to argue my case, and I'm going to try to rationally understand this. But ultimately, the rebellious son is still what it is. And that's so. Faith sometimes supplants our rational thinking. We can't only rely on what we understand. We try our best, but ultimately,
the Talmud is an outgrowth of the oral tradition.
It is the oral tradition.
It's the oral tradition.
This is the oral
that's
tradition.
been written down.
Exactly.
All right. It's been codified.
That's right.
But we believe that the Torah is literally from God.
Correct.
The rest of it
Correct.
is oral tradition.
Correct.
That's passed from generation to generation. Finally, they decide, let's get it all together, because it's going to get forgotten.
Exactly.
And it gets translated. It goes from one ear. It's the old telephone going around the room.
I know where he's
so
going.
where are we saying that this is from God?
All right, it's a good question.
Because men have been doing
what? Are you giving me the 5? No way. 5 to 9 already?
Yeah.
4 to 9.
Yeah, but we want an answer.
The guy looked.
No, you want an answer.
I looked at the candle 8 days.
8 days he looked at the candle. Okay, now we're going to answer your question. Bob is asking now the $64,000 question. Here, $64 million question, I would up it. He asked an excellent question, okay? When we first started this Talmud a couple of weeks ago, one of the statements I made beforehand is that in Orthodox Judaism, the Talmud is what we call a there's a word that I use and I like that word. It's a codification, but it has the final say. It has the final say in all matters of halacha, in all matters of Jewish law. Okay? Why does it have all matters? Why should it have the one veto? I'm sorry, that's what it has veto power. Even if we say today, you know what, this law that we're talking about, it's silly, it doesn't make any sense, too bad. That's the way it is, that's the ruling, and you have to follow the ruling. Why do we say that? Because we have a tradition, and Maimonides writes it over and over and over again, that one of the principles of faith, of orthodoxy, now you have to remember that's a key word, of orthodoxy, is that the Talmud is written with divine inspiration. Meaning that the people that wrote the Talmud, Rabbi and his court, Ravina and Ravashi, the writers, were writing with divine inspiration.
Inspiration.
Now, what does divine inspiration mean? That they hit the nail on the head. Meaning that all of the questions that you asked, whether it was broken down, believe me, for 1,000 years you could imagine how these laws were digested and regurgitated and rethought, and we did this. They were able, somehow miraculously, to understand and to get it 100% right. So, in matters of faith, there's no argument that this is, as Rambam writes, Torah Shebal Peh, the oral tradition is as valid as the written tradition. There's absolutely no bifurcation. You can't separate the two of them. One is as equally, even though we believe that the written came from God, this came from God too. So when Ravina was writing with his hand, and he wrote down that if ox A gores ox B, he pays $50, that's the will of God. That's the will of God. That's what it comes down to be. And it's a matter of faith. Now, you can argue here from today till Wednesday, and you will bring every rational argument. And these arguments are ironclad. You will say, Rabbi, you're dreaming, you're on drugs. There's absolutely no way that this could have happened, because think about this. Had the Jews starting from Egypt, traveling, and Moses is long dead, and Joshua is long dead, and David is long dead, and Samuel is long dead, and then they moved. They didn't stay in one place. Even if they had lived in one small town, it would have been difficult to keep everything, in-house. But they traveled from one place to another. They were exiled. They came back. The Maccabees came around. There was 2 minutes left. Okay. No.
If it's so clear, why is it debated?
No, it's debated because we forgot what some of the rules were, and therefore once the rule was decided, this became a matter of faith law, that this is what God said, because the rules were that Allah Rabbin v'yachid, Allah karabin. If a majority says one thing and there's an individual opinion, the rules go according to the rabbin. Why? Even though the sole opinion might be so rational, might be so logical, it doesn't make a difference. So therefore there is within the oral tradition room to debate. But once the Allah is established, there's no more debating.
Well, it's like the Constitution is very fluid. We're going to have an argument from today till tomorrow whether or not abortion was ever mentioned in the Constitution.
Right.
But someone's going to say yes, someone's going to say no. The idea is that when it was written, it was supposed to be fluid, it was supposed to be flexible so it could be used for all these years. Well, this is the same thing. You may have to, at the end, say the word is the word, but there's lots of room for interpretation in the middle as to what infidelity means.
Right.
What's the argument?
Okay. Now, we're just going to close the camera just a second. Now, take it outside of orthodoxy, and this is where now, because for 1,500 years, this is the way that the Talmud was studied. It was codified by Maimonides. It was not reinterpreted, but there was other commentaries on the Talmud. I mentioned there were probably 10,000 commentaries on the Talmud. But this is the way it was accepted for 1,500 years, until Germany in the middle 1800s. In the middle of the 1800s, something happened in the world that did not happen before. An enlightenment swept over the world. Enlightenment not only tore down the doors of Judaism, but it tore down the doors of all religion. The Catholic Church was under duress, which happened even before with Luther. But I'm talking particularly when the Reform movement came. And then there was every religion was now being bombarded, because it was the era of rationalism, of logic. I mean, that was most important. So out of that growth, then you look at this and you say, Rabbi, I mean, let's be honest. This is not the way you believe that it was. And therefore now we have this splitting of the ways. Reform rejected this outright. They said, if you don't believe in the divinity of the written tradition, that there's no way God came out of a cloud and said it. So obviously, what are you going to do with the oral tradition? Obviously, you're going to discard it. Came along conservative and said, no. Listen, you know what? Yeah, you guys on the right, you're too much of faith. You guys on the left are too much rational. It's got to be a middle ground where, you know what? The written tradition is the written tradition. That's divine. The oral tradition is where we can have some kind of a debate. So even if the Talmud, like Bob said, well, the conservative movement says, you know what, let's use this as a starting point. So say, listen, you know what, these guys were humans. They were men of, you know, just like we were. And therefore, if we find something that's irrational or illogical or contradictory, you know, we have the right to rectify it. And that's where the differences of the streams.
Or our own commentary.
But the commentary is not a problem. See, commentary is not a problem because anybody could add commentary. The question is going to be ultimately, do you give the Talmud veto power, even if you yourself feel like, let's say, you know what? Let's take the rules of electricity. If I myself feel, you know what, this is not, we should be able to use electricity on Shabbos, and the Talmud says no, or like riding a horse. The Talmud prohibits riding a horse on Shabbos. Why? Because of this worry that down the line you're going to come in to probably do this, and it'll lead to that, and that'll lead to that. So today I would say, if we're modern and we're progressive, we would say, listen, my friends, in those days, people were worried about these things, but today we know better. We know a person's going to ride a horse. He's not going to ride it through vineyards. He's not going to rip off the grapes and eat it. He's only going to ride his horse, you know, in the desert. So we would say, hey, you know what? Today it's different, so we permit to do it, and that's the way conservatives have built the. I'm sorry, that must be God.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, I don't believe it. It's God. No. Excuse me 1 second. Hello? Yes.
No?
I'm doing good, but I'll have to call you back. You called at a very inopportune time here. We're in the middle of a tough discussion on the Talmud. I'll call you when I'm done. I don't know. The way it's going here, we could be here all night. We're fighting here.
8 days,
I'll call you when we're done. Yes. It could be days and days. Sorry about that. It's very, very...
So what happens when your cell phone rings in the middle of a Talmud discussion?
It's very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. You see that? You see that? I'm telling you. You can't win. You can't win. But what? No, I didn't see that one. Yeah, that's why I try to stay out of court. No matter what, I stay out of court. I don't want to stand in front of these judges, hanging judges here in California, Ninth Circuit. But you know what? But the thing is, that's
not the hanging.
I know.
They didn't listen to Turkey or whatever.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I want to make a point in one, going back to Ishmael,
Right.
rebellious stuff. We all agree, well, what you said, if you have faith that God sees everything and God, has the plan and
knows everything and has a
knows
plan,
everything.
right?
And what you said about the person killing the person that went
Right.
under, that maybe there was something. So maybe in this case with Ishmael, God even said that we can't kill him because he hasn't done anything yet.
Right.
He saw, God knew what was going to happen along
Right.
the
Down the
road,
way.
but there was something that it was meant to be that way because because let me just back over something. We say because the Arabs are now giving us the headaches.
Now.
Okay? No.
They've been doing it for...
That's what I'm saying. Well, they've been doing it for
A long time.
For a long time, giving us the headaches. But maybe God saw that was something that we
deserve them.
did. So that this is the creative.
No. But I'm telling you this is
Christians say yes every day.
This is a lot of people say this because when you look through history to justify this, because again, just to expand on what Carolina's saying, all right? Just what she's saying is that okay, we have to define what God is all about, because if we don't, Therefore, God is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-merciful, right? And therefore, since we did say in the beginning, the first thing we talked about was divine providence, right? Nothing happens coincidentally, right? Happens to them, it's because God willed it to happen, right? It wasn't because the person chose to happen, God willed it to happen. So she's 100% right, because the Jews ended up within the Arabs. They could have gone the other way. They could have gone east, or they could have gone north, or they could have gone south. They ended up with the Arabs, thinking that they're going to be hospitable. Therefore, God sent them there because they needed some cleansing, or whatever it is. Believe me, a lot of people argue history that way. Now, the danger of that is two things. Not that I disagree with you on the concept of what God is all about. I agree with you on God. The danger of that is, we're always going to blame the victim. You see 6 million people dying in the Holocaust. You're somehow going to justify and rationalize, and which Hitler could have said, what do you want? If you're a trusting Jew, well, I mean, you know what? The Jews deserved it, because otherwise, why would God have allowed this to do? Why would God have allowed this to happen? So obviously, God wanted this to happen, and since God wanted this to happen, so why are you punishing me? So he puts a good argument in front of us. Okay, because one, we can't deny that God allowed this to happen, right? Because unless we change our definition of God, unless we make God impotent, right? We say God is up there, but there's nothing he can do because down here no, we don't do that. What we say to Hitler is, you know what? Maybe God did want it to happen, but he didn't want you to do it. Who asked you to be God's angel of death? He appointed you the angel of death? Let even say God wanted 6 million Jews to die. He could have sent a flood. He could have sent a tsunami. He could have sent the Black Plague. He could have done a number of things. Who asked you to be God's angel of death? So that's why we punish Hitler. But the idea of blaming the victims, that, you know what, maybe they went to the Arab because they deserved it, which has been an argument for a lot of people have used, throughout history, is that the danger of it is that you're going to justify the murderers, and the murderers are going to say, you know what, you know why you came here, because God sent you here. And during the war, a lot of people did say, when the Jews were burning in the gas chambers, where's God? Huh? You people of faith, you walk there, you say Shema Yisrael, where is your God? You have faith in God, where is God? Now, believe me, if you're standing in Auschwitz, or if you're standing with the Arabs, or you're standing with Chmelnytsky while the butchers are massacring you, it's a good test of faith, I would say, right? I mean, if someone is saying to you, where is your God? Why isn't he saving you at this point? You have to look up at God and say, listen, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't know why this is happening to us, but I still accept your judgment. Now we're going to theology now. This has nothing to do with the Talmud, because we're talking complete philosophy and how we describe God. The Talmud doesn't care how you think about God. If it's stoning whether you believe in the Almighty God is omnipotent or you think is impotent. We don't care what your feelings about God is all about. Or if you practice yoga and you believe in Vishnu, whatever it is, we don't care. But that's just the issue that we have to, and therefore, there would be a good case. Now listen, there would be a good case for saying, like Bob says, it gets rid of Ishmael, but, it's not something that we can decide like on one foot. I mean, it's an argument that we're going to have for a lot of years. Why God doesn't intervene more often? Because really, that's what angels were really saying: is they want you to intervene right now in history and change the course of history right at this moment. And the same question would have been: why couldn't God have Hitler's mother trip, and have an abortion? Or so something like that.
On with her idea,
right.
And say it's not only that the Jews that deserved it, but also God sent Hitler specifically to be the one. So again,
but how do we know this? But how do we know this?
How do we know that it was about the Jews, the victims?
And what would have happened if Ishmael would have been slain?
Would have been any different? Would have history really been changed? Who knows if history would have changed? I mean, the angels definitely thought so, that it would have, but we don't know. But Casey, these questions are really more theoretical than practical, because you know what? It's like asking how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. How many? As
None.
many as can fit. None?
You can't fit there.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this can apply to your personal life, that it speaks to everything, because sometimes you say, or at least you think, I'm doing the things the right way,
Right,
I'm a good person.
I try my best,
I try my best.
I don't hurt anybody.
And then
Yeah.
something happens
Right.
and so,
So you know what? But I would not say it. You know what? It does say, just to back up Catalina's words, if something happens to you, the Talmud says, if something bad happens to you, you get into a bad car accident, let's say, it wasn't your fault. What it does say, he says, "Mefashpesh v'masav," a person who's a person of faith should check their acts. What did I do? Did maybe I cheated somebody? Was I mean to somebody? Did I not treat somebody fairly? It does say, and if you look into it, because what the Talmud is trying to say is because nothing is haphazard. The fact that you got into an accident, even though it wasn't your fault, maybe something in your past, something that you did, justified you ending up like this. Okay, but that's for me to decide. Not for you to decide about me to decide about you. If something bad happens about you, I have to say, oh, poor Catalina, she never deserved it, she was such a good person, why did this happen to her?
Right.
You, if you're a smart person, then you look into your life and you say, maybe I gotta correct certain things. I gotta be lenient on you, you have to be harsh on you and lenient on me. That's the way the Talmud looks at it. But to say, look, that guy got it because he deserved it, that's not something that we have to purview because that's abuse of power. You know what? It's so easy to blame people. You know what? Like this idiot Pat Robertson. You know what? He goes out there and he says, if something happens now to the people of Pennsylvania, they shouldn't ask God because they rejected him. I mean, that's a religious leader says this. This is insane, total insanity. As far as I think, it's total insanity because that's total arrogance. You know God's cheshbonis, you know God's accounting. What are you? I know Pat Robertson believes that he's one step, closer to God than all of us are. But that's to me, it's foolish. It's foolishness to stick your neck out like this, just like it's foolishness to predict what's going to happen. America is the Sodom and Gomorrah, and we're going to be punished because our morals have decayed over the past 4 decades.
Well, but you started out by saying people have to buy into this.
Right.
Okay, Pat Robertson in the United States of America can say any dumbass thing he wants to say.
Right.
And he does every single day.
Right.
Buy into it.
Some people buy into it.
A lot of people buy into it.
People
Not
buy
enough
into it.
people for us to worry about it.
No. Oh, I think.
Business, man.
I would disagree
I
with the
don't
judge
want-
on this one.
No.
I think there's a lot more people buying into it than there was 30 years ago.
I agree with that.
Yes, I
agree with that.
I think there's an assault today. I believe there's an active assault today on our rights. And what's going on is that there is an active assault on the entire scientific community today, on all aspects of it. Now,